Wheatgrass juice, a superfood packed with vitamins, minerals, enzymes, amino acids, and antioxidants. Tom Stem of DynamicGreens tells you how wheatgrass improves health like no other juice can. Welcome to Richters Seminars. This video presentation is from a series of free educational seminars on herb and garden topics offered each year at Richters.
Hi everybody. I want to make sure you understand that I'm speaking from the position of a farmer and that I have absolutely no medical education. So anything we talk about is really my own observations and open to your criticism, your critique, and your investigation, and any of your questions are welcome. I'll just tell you what I've seen. We actually got started on the wheatgrass juice about 1972 as a response to a family crisis, and it worked. That's the main thing that I see that's exciting about this food. And I've kind of formulated the thought that we are an engine. It happens that our fuel is food. And that the grocery store system is focused on shelf life, whereas we are seeking nutrition. That's a conflict. And so the foods in the grocery store are cooked, pasteurized, radiated, dried, and back to my own theory, and based on much smarter people than me who have had lots to say about it, I see nutrition as being in four categories. One of them is sugars, fats, proteins, carbohydrates. One of them is minerals. One of them is vitamins. And one of them is enzymes. And if we are missing any one of those four categories, we aren't that long before we're sick. It'd be the same as trying to operate a motor and not bothering with motor oil. You got gasoline, you got air in the tires, you've polished the body, you've cleaned the windows, you put on new window wipers, but you didn't bother with oil. You got a failure. So the food section that I've first mentioned, the fats, proteins, they make us feel satisfied. So when we dine, and that's in our diet, we feel well fed. They're not subject to destruction by heat. They're not subject to destruction by radiation. They're not subject to destruction by light and air. The vitamins are diminished but not eliminated. So we still get a vitamin flow. The minerals are probably not hurt at all because calcium exposed to heat is still calcium. Iron, still iron. Zinc, still zinc. No change. And so those minerals that we require, we got them. But enzymes, you need to know a little bit of science. At 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's quite a bit cooler than your hot water tank, begin to be destroyed. And the destruction of an enzyme is usually complete by 120 degrees. You've got absolutely nothing left. When you have that deficiency for a long period of time, something goes wrong with you. And it's not predictable. Now, if you were to think in terms of going into a group of your friends, neighbors, family, 25 people, how many ailments are in that circle? One will have irritated bowel syndrome. One's got high blood pressure. One's got chronic fatigue syndrome. And the diseases are multiple and difficult to define the source. What I'm suggesting is that they basically all go back to nutrition. So if you nourish the body, it tries to repair itself. So then that puts us on a quest. How do we provide that nutrition? And that's where the wheatgrass juice is extremely powerful. We all know that if you were to put a herd of cattle or horses or sheep or any other grazing animal out on a grassy field, they'll grow, they'll add bone, they'll add weight, they'll have babies, and they'll have milk for the babies, and all they got was grass. Holy smokes! Pretty revealing, isn't it? So now your own life observation is supporting the idea that there's something here. The juicing system is simply a way of making it digestible for us. We can't eat a bale of hay, but we can drink a glass of juice. So it's just a matter of getting it to us. Now, the ideal juicing system will not diminish the value of that food. And that means it can't be hot, it can't have a lot of air, certainly radiation isn't going to be present. Well, that's what we try to do. When we first started doing this, we were just doing it in a patch. Well, first we started in trays in the window. Then, to our dismay, we found that we had mold. And in a clumsy, groping sort of way, we tried doing it outdoors. Outdoors, there was no mold. Well, that was very interesting because it had never occurred to us what a downward move in quality to have mold was. All of a sudden it tasted better. It was cleaner. It was light. And we didn't have any of that rolling stomach. So we never grew it indoors again. So then people that knew us, we felt obligated when we heard of a serious illness. We'd wait till things had calmed down and then we'd discuss with them, you know, you could grow this juice if you wanted. And we were trying to show them how to be gardeners. The problem is most households with a major crisis in them aren't very functional. Nerves are raw. Everybody's irritated. They're tired. There's often even a financial problem because somebody's lost a job. And so a number of these people came back and said, have you got any to spare? We ended up giving away more than we were using ourselves after a period of time. Now remember, we're talking over a 42-year span of time. And then it became a heavy load. It's very labor intensive to make this juice. And eventually I declared we got to sell it because we need better equipment. And it makes no sense for us to take personal savings, produce this juice, and then give it away. So very reluctantly, because I saw it as extracting funds from a household that's in trouble, that's why I was resistant to the idea of selling it. But I just had to do it. When I did, immediately we had a surge in demand. That doesn't make sense. Now that it's costing money, you want more? But I hadn't realized people felt like they were imposing. Now that they're not imposing, I want this much. And so we are now growing over 500 acres of the grass. Most of it's rented. In this area, it's unthinkable that we would have the finances to own 500 acres. But anyway, that's what we produce. And we've had a pretty well continuous supply of this juice now for many years, although we ran out last year. This year we will not run out. Most of the people that buy the juice buy it directly from us because we encountered a law, and the law stated that any juice sold for resale had to be pasteurized. And that started off as an FDA, US regulation, but the Canadian government always falls in line. They try to be uniform. So we don't sell it to stores. We don't want to pasteurize it, because then it's back to being the same as the other foods stripped of this part of its nutrients. For a long time we were totally word of mouth sales, and then a son became interested in working with us and joining us, and he put up a website. From that, there's been really an explosion of activity. So we've been doing it, as you know, as I said, for a long time. Now what that does, though, it gives us contact with the user. We see almost everybody that uses it, or talk to them by phone if they're, scattered across the country. And I've got so many anecdotes that we could be talking a week from now, and I wouldn't be repeating myself in terms of this is what happened to this person, this is what happened to that person. And I've actually come to expect success. Now, that expectation of success wasn't immediate, because we first thought that if you had an ounce or two of the juice, you had used wheatgrass juice. And then we came to the conclusion that what you're trying to do is change your own blood into the healing agent. And you've got to have more to do that. And if your own blood becomes the healing agent, it touches every part of your own body. And there's no danger in it. It's just a food. And so we've upped it to the point now that we think you should be using 10 ounces a day initially if you're dealing with a crisis. And that's where my expectation of success comes. It's the same thing as if I'm sitting on my tractor with a front end loader and I pull the lever, it goes up. If I push the lever, it goes down. Every time. It's not conditional. We had another interesting observation along the way. One of my fascinations was breeding dogs. So for more than 40 years, I never had less than 25 adult dogs. Now, lots of puppies, but I don't even count them. In the veterinarian world, you'll find that the disease spectrum of dogs is very close to that of humans. And with giving these dogs a little bit of juice, we found that this whole spectrum of disease disappeared. Now, what I'm saying is verifiable because we've used the same vet for the entire number of years that we've had the dogs. So this would be something that I could prove. In dogs, if we were to list a few things, one would be skin disorders, skeletal disorders, kidney, liver, and cancer. And that last one in the dog literature is verified as the major cause of death in dogs. So I've got juice when we're making it that sometimes didn't please us. It was surprising when I got too much sand in it, my wife would reject it. That went off into another freezer. That's my dog food. Or maybe the color was off. It was just a little too yellow. That went into my dog food supply. Or maybe the packages weren't properly filled. That's poor value for anybody that's buying it. It's not a full package. That went into the dog food. So the second-rate juice is what the dogs got. I'll use 3 decades because that's a huge span of years. We never had one single dog diagnosed with one of those 5 ailments I just named. Not a single one. And our vet raised a question. Why don't I see your dogs for this range of illnesses? Well, I hadn't really thought about it, but I guess the thing that's different, they're getting wheatgrass juice. Well, this is exciting because very often when you're doing something for your own health, your friend, your family will say, well, you got to believe in this, right? We've all heard that. The dogs don't believe in it. They don't know what I'm doing. I do not have a placebo effect. So what it becomes in my mind is very dependable science. Put this in their routine and you change the profile. You change the health profile. The other thing that came out of that was quite interesting was, well, how much are they getting? Because I just said, when you got a crisis, you need a large amount. Well, as I sort of looked back, it was not planned, but the dogs were getting approximately 1.5 to 2 ounces of juice per 120 pounds of body weight. So if I had 120 pounds of dog, they were getting about 1.5 to 2 ounces of wheatgrass juice per day. Not very much. And yet I had a huge change in the health profile. All kinds of other things occurred with that. My vet bills dropped. The fertility went up. Just all kinds of things that make a dog breeder happy. So, I don't know, maybe I've given you enough now that if I've stirred your curiosity, I will try to share any experience that we've had if anybody's got things they want to fire at me.
Care to talk about your original traces?
About which?
Care to talk about your original traces back in the 70s? And why you started in the first place?
It's kind of embarrassing to my wife, but she isn't here. She was diagnosed with lymphomic breast cancer. And the most uneducated man that I knew, grade 6 public school, didn't quite finish grade 6 because his dad needed him on the farm, brought me a book. He was a wonderful friend. And the book discussed that cancer was a nutritional disease. Now this is 1972. Can you imagine how far out of line that was with conventional thinking? It wasn't until into the 1990s that the Cancer Society acknowledged any connection between food and cancer. And only then, after the public taught them. They lead beautifully from the rear. So that started. Now, there was some real drama with that. Because, holy smokes, we're taking an awful risk not to do the surgery and the chemotherapy that is now being recommended, right? That's a big risk. And my wife is a registered nurse. You've got to be kidding. This is contrary to her whole training. But she had worked on a cancer ward. She knew their success ratio. And she had the courage to do this and stick with it, even though some of her working associates came to the house and said, and this is a quote, "You must do what the doctor says, you're going to die." End of quote. Now my wife is at home today, alive and well, and just came back from a shopping trip spending my money. And I love it. So, I don't know. Yeah. You can see there's some drama there, though.
So, what about a cancer patient who's done the chemo, done the radiation? Would this still help them?
Let me ask you a question. When is it not appropriate to have the maximum quality nutrition possible?
Never.
You got it. Now, I'm getting way out of my depth here if I get into a medical field because I'm a farmer with no medical training. Okay? But you've answered your own question. It's never inappropriate to cheat yourself nutritionally. So I view it kind of from this point of view. Where there's life, there's hope. Now you maximize the hope. So.
Okay, another adult question. You didn't mention the heart. Does wheatgrass help the heart?
I didn't mention it, and it's because I think there is very little effect. I think that is one area that is not particularly influenced by this nutrition. She asked whether or not there had been an effect in terms of heart, and that was my response. That's one area that I haven't observed significant change. So it's not a cure-all.
Does wheatgrass act as a diuretic for the body or no?
Act as a
diuretic, like it drains fluid from the body? Or no?
diuretic.
Diuretic.
Okay.
Because parsley does. Parsley is a diuretic.
You know, every now and then the question of science comes up in terms of what is it, what makes it work. There's been very intense work to try and determine what the active ingredients are. And they come back with a kind of a frustration. Well, we really don't know. I guess we'll have to call that the grass effect. In other words, they really don't know. And so I'm looking at it from the point of view, there's much I don't know about the mechanics of the way things work. But what I am excited about is it does work. So if you're going to try to understand it all, you may not. Yeah.
And having a look and watch people work the concept. And if you have a finely tuned machine, everything will benefit at some point. So if you have a heart disease and you're trying to fix it, that might not be fixing now. You might prevent it in the future by doing other things for yourself. That's what you're
It does. Now, I understated it a little bit when I said I think there's not a strong observable effect. Heart problems generally involve inflammation in the arteries. I think there is a profound effect on inflammation by the right nutrition, a leveling, a subsiding of inflammation. And so there is probably more effect than I know. What I do know is one of the breeds that I was breeding, Irish Wolfhounds, and they're notoriously short-lived. I noticed that the average lifespan of my dogs would be between 25 and 50% longer than the average of others that I knew with the breed. So the extension of life was very noticeable. And so I think the same would apply to people. So now I've got some samples back here if anybody wants it. How many people here have tasted this stuff before? Half, maybe. What I want to point out is the traditional growing system is based on work done by a lady by the name of Ann Wigmore. Ann Wigmore grew it in trays, juiced it, and then in her home in Boston invited people to come and try it, learn her little theories of nutrition, and take that whole technique home. And she had marvelous success. Today's generally available juice is based on the very same techniques that she used. Now, I think of Ann Wigmore as a genius, but Ann Wigmore was growing it in trays. Trays are always conducive to mold. Ann Wigmore did not have much soil in the tray. Currently, if you go to the grow operations, they have little or no soil. In fact, you'll even look at the roots, and they'll show you how the root can be used as part of the input to the juicing machine because it's so clean. It's got no soil. Ann Wigmore had her light source coming through glass. Glass does provide some filtration. What we're doing is outdoor. A deep root, no restriction on the root. Unfiltered sunlight. And there's another thing that goes on. The people you admire the most have probably had at various points in time some kind of stress in their life. They've coped with, they've sorted this out, they've solved it. That's made them better people. A plant that sits in a dead still environment with light beaming down over it, never any breeze, never any chill, rock solid steady temperature, cannot have the same qualities as a plant that has to lean into the wind, that has a chilly night. The plant actually, in going through stress, it produces a different chemistry. That's what we see in the outdoors. And that's why we don't do anything except outdoors now. So this juice that we've got is uniquely different than what you'll find in the health food stores. The other thing that I observed, every juicing operation that I have seen has, in some cases, a screw gear, sometimes a different mechanism, but the pulp goes out one side, the juice drips down below. Routine? Everybody seen one of those? Now think about that. We've got three major enemies of enzymes. One is radiation, one is heat, and the other is air. You're fully aerating your juice one drop at a time. Every drop is fully aerated as it falls to the bottom of the glass. Well, all we did is make a closed chamber so that the juice is collected in a closed chamber. Now, when you look at this juice that I've got here, I want you to notice the brilliance of the green. It's alive. You can tell it. That browning, that slight browning, is loss of enzymes. And you see it in every health food store. So, like everything else, you have to be a smart consumer. You've got to know how to measure quality. So I'm giving you some tools with which you can measure quality. And that's one of them. Yeah?
So if you're growing it outside, you're not growing it now, how has this been preserved?
Flash freezing. And we've gone through an incredible learning curve. You'd see the humor of this. When we were first doing it, I bought the freezer from every neighbor that was moving away. I had approximately 30 chest freezers. They were all in a big line, actually a double line, and we called Niagara Falls when we were turning them on so they could open another gate. They were empty but running. So then when we did our juice, we laid it on the cold metal of the bottom, one layer. And that would be the day's work. We'd fill the bottom of all these freezers. And the next morning, we'd take all of this frozen juice and put it in one for storage. So now one becomes a storage and all the others are fast freeze. Anyway, we outgrew that. We then put in a walk-in. The walk-in, 24 feet by 10 feet by 8. And we thought that was absolutely enormous. We now have 3 of those. We then decided that we were going to rapid freeze the juice before storage. We took a tractor trailer and equipped it with elaborate freezing equipment. Unfortunately, conventional freezing systems involve a defrost cycle. So we'd be hard at it, a team of people working with me, and we got to wait for an hour and a half for that thing to defrost. What a disappointment that was. Hauled it away. Replaced it with a nitrogen freezer. Now nitrogen puts it into the category of cryogenic. Cryogenic means you're counting on the change of state from liquid to gas to create the refrigeration. And the cryogenic that we use is nitrogen And so you just have a valve. The valve puts a little more through into your closed chamber, and the temperature drops. So now we're operating at around minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That juice is frozen so fast after it's made, it's had no chance to discolor, no chance to oxidize, no chance to in any way deteriorate. And there you go. And by the way, I don't know where I got off track here. I'm not trying to be commercial about our juice. I really wanted to stay more generic and talk about wheatgrass. And so I apologize for that. I didn't mean to be advertising. This lady hasn't asked a question. Let's hear hers.
I noticed in the literature there's a note that if people are allergic to grass, it might not be helpful for them. And what degree of allergy would that be?
Have you bought anything new recently? Recently I bought a kerosene heater, space heater. And I read all of the literature. I was horrified. I can't use it if it's this. I can't use it if it's that. You must always have it under supervision. Put it out when you go to bed. And on and on and on. That's our legal protection. Now, here's the fact. Again, spoken as a farmer, almost all allergies are related to either the pollens and or the glutens. This grass should be, and we do, not everybody does though, clipped when it's just a green growing, lush looking lawn. Not when it's up into a head and has grain formed and the pollens. So if you don't have pollens and you don't have gluten, it's almost unknown to have an allergic reaction. Not impossible, but pretty unlikely. Anyway, I sidetracked things there. Well, of course, we don't have plants to sell. And the problem is, we do get a question quite often, do you have some grass? Can we buy the clippings? And the problem is they have no shelf life. In a matter of hours, they're starting to wilt. Even if you refrigerate them, you might get 3-4 days. But beyond that, you're beginning to get a very downgraded product. So what our method of storing is clip it, juice it, freeze it. Bing, bing, bing. Once it's frozen, you've stopped all the biological activity. Nothing's happening. It's frozen. And so it doesn't become biologically active again until you melt it. So that period of time is of no significance in the aging of the product. The time that counts is juicing to freeze, and then from freeze to thaw. But in between, what difference? If it's a week, a month, we've used it as long as 3 years as our own experiment. And we thought there was some deterioration at 3 years. But, yeah.
Again, it's about the plant. I read that it was good for promoting healthy sleep. So just hypothetically, if you bought a plant and you put it in your bedroom, like how long does it last?
The plant, it would be just like any other potted plant.
Right.
And you can buy it,
Right.
that way. You might be able to buy seed. You might be able to get them right here and then grow it your own. But I don't see the real benefit in an environmental way that I see in using it as a nutrition.
They make a two-parter. Real quick, yes or no? Cat. Yes?
Animals tend to seek what they need.
Cats like grass.
All of us have seen cats go out and chew grass. All of us have seen dogs go out and chew grass. And it's like they're seeking something, they don't even know what. I call it the equivalent of cribbing. And cribbing means you've got an unsatisfied need, you're searching for something. It's why cattle chew the top off the fences and eat the farmer's glove when he drops it, or chew up his hat that he dropped. That's cribbing. They're looking for something. And if the nourishment of the livestock is correct, they haven't got any interest in chewing up the farmer's hat. Which is really interesting. We are also prone to cribbing. That's why we tend, when we've got something a little out of balance, to eat without cessation. We can't stop at one cookie. We got to eat the whole package, and we can't stop at, that's cribbing. Aren't we funny creatures, really? If there's one thing I'd like to be known for, it would be a good observer. Got your eyes open. You notice what's going on around you. That, if you wanted to pay me a compliment, that's what you'd say. Gosh, I think you've got some good observations. Anybody want to try some juice? Oh, we got another question.
Okay, just a comment and a question. I recently had somebody give me your product as a birthday gift, and she thought I deserved it. I thought this was great. And that's why I'm here today, to find out a little bit more about it, and I did. The other question I had is, how do you actually harvest it? What do you need to decide yourself? You had how is it?
We've had enormous fun at that. The harvesting. We've gone through probably 10 or more different attempts at cutting machinery. Okay? So it's a learn experience, because you can't go and buy from John Deere a wheatgrass cutting tool. They don't have it. So what we've used is a thing called a haybine. Now, a haybine cuts and then narrows the clippings into a stream and drops them on the ground. There are two kinds of mower. One is a sickle mower, and it's like that, and the other is a rotating mower. The rotating mower chews, bruises, and bangs up. The clipping is like clipping a flower that you put in a dish. The flower doesn't know it's cut for a while. So we use the clipper, the scissor mower. And instead of letting it fall on the ground, we put a conveyor belt that takes it back and drops it onto a carrying trailer. Then the trailer is taken up and that juice is processed, while another trailer is put on and taken in sequence. We've got a washer. This we didn't build. The washer has a conveyor belt, and it would be about as long as from me to you, and about that much depth of water. And the water is being violently stirred by pumps. So it's like a washing machine, but with no physical contact with the content. Like it's just the rush of water. It's not a blade. It's not a... So it whirls and swirls this juice, or grass, just the plain grass, as the conveyor slowly moves it along. Then it rises up out of the water and onto a dryer. So that's how we wash it. Now, why do that? Because when you've got anything in a field, you've got a splash from hard rains. So you've got soil splash on the grass. And it's surprising how much, I'll call it silt, comes off the bottom of that tank. Large amounts, like shovelfuls of sand. And my wife didn't like them in the juice.
How do you manage the wheat? Do you use Roundup?
How do we manage our wheat?
Weeds.
Weeds.
Yeah, you use Roundup.
Really important question. Because you can't use Roundup or any other form of weed killer, chemical, for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, this group of people would have real strong prejudice about that, as I do. So we have to do it mechanically. If you go way back in the Bible, you'll find references to what's called summer fallow. Summer fallow means working the soil with no crop planted. We work the soil for a length of time before we plant the crop. And then if you look across the field, you get just a tiny hue of green. It's letting you know that grasses and weeds are starting to come again. Then you're back on it with the tractor. And until you can't ever stop it from turning green, but you make the interval very slow, like it's a long time before it turns green. So then you freshly cultivate and plant the seed. Now when the wheat seed comes up, it provides a little canopy, like a little layer of shade. With the shade of the soil, the weeds don't come. So then the wheat grows and it reaches the stage where you want to cut it. Then you cut. Now you've removed the canopy. Once the canopy's off, the sun is striking the soil. The weeds start to come. So if you try to get a second crop off that planting, you've got a high percentage of weeds, about 25%. So we don't ever do a second crop. It's all one planting, one cutting. But that's a great question. And it's taken us quite a while to work out the technique. It's a farming technique, is what it is. We don't use a seed drill. We did, but what's a seed drill look like? You can look across the field and you see the rows, right? Am I right? Yeah, and the rows are about 7 inches apart. We're good observers. One of our neighbors planted a field and he used a broadcaster. Now that was a thing on the back of the tractor that had a little, I don't know what you call it, but it flung the seed. And the seed is just scattered like crazy. But it's random, not in rows. So then the canopy is a more complete coverage faster. We plant all of ours using that technique, a broadcaster. Really interesting though. Not a seed drill, because the rows have too much sun exposure in the middle. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. From working the first patch with a shovel and maybe even a rototiller, we now have 5 tractors, 2 sets of plows, 4 sets of cultivators, all kinds of discs, and so on. Like I say, as I told Ted, we have become investors in rusty iron. And we got a lot of it.
Would you start seeding in
Well, we seed as we clip the preceding crop. But first we work it. But we've got quite a bit planted right now under the snow. So that'll actually come on as the snow melts. And as it... Yeah. We do plant in the fall, but we plant in the spring too. So when the soil is right, we plant, because we have to have it staged, because we can't bring it all in at one time. It comes in a few acres at a time. So it's staged. Hey, thanks for all the questions. Showed some interest. But I'd like you to try our juice. Come on back.
At Richters, it's not just a garden, it's a whole new world. For herb plants, seeds, veggies, and more, visit us at richters.com or call 1-800-668-4372.